Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. In the next session, we're joined by Catherine Qi, Head of Research at Winmark, Doris Suchet, C-Suite Development Director at Winmark, and Stephen Pobjoy, Senior Stakeholder Lead at the CIPD, who will be exploring the question of, is development of future skills now an organisational imperative? This promises to be a really interesting session, and we'd like to thank both Winmark and the CIPD for being here this morning. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, James. Just quickly double checking that Stephen is here to share some introductions.
He was. I saw him.
Can't actually see him either, so.
We're just checking. Just give him 20 seconds, otherwise might just launch forth. Catherine, why don't you start, and we'll continue to pedal very fast in the backgrounds to try and get him online.
Thank you very much. Thanks, James. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Part of this session is presenting some really great research that we produce every year in partnership with the CIPD, understanding the key challenges that the C-suite are facing. And the other part is around the future of skills development, where it's really going in terms of AI adoption, technological change, economic fluctuations, and geopolitical geopolitical landscape too. So a quick introduction to Doris and myself. Hi, I'm the head of research here at Winmark. I lead a lot of our member-led research, so anything our C-suite members, which is around 2,000, want to know about what's going on. And I'm here with Doris, our C-suite director, and she oversees the account management of the C-suite. Stephen's also here, joining us today as well.
Thank you, Catherine. Stephen Pobjoy from CIPD. I'm the Senior Stakeholder Lead, so I work with our HR leader community. Sorry, I had trouble joining the webinar.
All good, all good. The C-suite priorities research in partnership with the CIPD understands the top issues of C-suite agenda across a global network of non-executive directors, chief executive officers, chief operating officers, and chief HR officers in particular. Every year we field this survey, and every year it gets very strong engagement from our C-suite network. This year we had around 220 respondents across various regions and industries. What came through really strongly in this year's research was the focus on people. So in previous waves, where the focus was mainly on technological or organizational strategy or economic change, this year we really see the interconnection of people coming forth and a workforce strategy to realize technological, organizational, and economic objectives. You'll see also that C-suite and HR leaders are facing a myriad of challenges. Some of them don't have a clear solution at this point, but we like to share the range with you today to get your thoughts, but also to let you know that if you're facing these challenges, you're not alone. Our C-suite network are also facing them. So some of the challenges identified were talent gaps, particularly in key industries such as insurance, renewable energy, construction, where C-suite is experiencing a gap in terms of subject matter expertise, as well as digital skills. So whether that's regulation, a particular technological skill, a particular kind of software skills as well with organizational digital transformation. They also face skill acquisition challenges, mainly across emerging needs with new renewable energy development or changes in regulation on the consumer side. accelerating technological adoption, and aging workforces. Some are also facing upskilling and reskilling hurdles, such as securing C-suite buy-in, particularly from HR directors and CHROs, to jumpstart reskilling or upskilling initiatives or learning and development plans. Getting that buy-in is still a work in progress, but also understanding where the skills gaps are during uncertainty as the economic and technological landscape shifts so much. They face challenges in planning and actually executing their desired change. So whether that's hiring, job design, or again, understanding that future capabilities needs piece. They face recruitment challenges. So some find that there is a strong external talent pool and they're getting very good CVs coming through, but they struggle to understand whether or not the candidate is a right fit during the interview process. They hypothesize that this is due to kind of the growing reliance on AI-driven recruitment. So actually candidates are creating CVs for the job description, and they can do that through the use of ChatGPT. But actually when it comes to the interview stage, there's not that right fit, or they themselves can't address the candidate holistically. A large part of this is due to candidates seeing recruitment as being more tick box focused, and organizations and HR leaders see themselves as falling into this category sometimes too. So they overlook cultural fit and growth potential. They overlook soft skills such as critical thinking, adaptability, curiosity, problem solving, which Stephen will go into in a bit more detail, and a mindset as well. So that mindset change, a willingness to fail, a continuous learning mindset, and a growth mindset. Some HR leaders also hold their hands up and say, internal promotions are a great retention strategy. However, overemphasizing those or just focusing on those as a workforce strategy can run the risk of advancing underprepared individuals within their teams. The use and adoption of AI raises new questions when it comes to performance management by our HR leaders. They are in the midst of understanding how to identify and measure useful AI-related skills, how to motivate and support employees in building the right proficiencies, and then how to plan their skills gaps and talent strategy in line with AI tech adoption, which proves challenging because new AI tools are coming to the market quite rapidly. And they're trying to shift their performance metrics from traditional outputs and performance assessments to understanding more habitual behaviors. So again, that focus on soft skills such as critical thinking, adaptability, experimentation, failing fast. And they also see a lot of value in providing younger generations a space to experiment and adopt these habitual behaviors. However, they understand that a dual approach is needed, so control over the experimentation timeframe and the experimentation activity, as well as that empowering element, that flexibility, and focusing on generating independence amongst their younger teams. So that's related to empowering kind of early career employees to contribute creatively and differently, but also on the other side, providing that strong leadership direction and actually demonstrating how that changes the organization in a positive way.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. And it's been a pleasure working on the research jointly with Winmark. And I think there's a lot of shared research that CIPD and Winmark are joining forces on now, and some of the findings really do overlap. So Doris, I just wondered if you had any comments on some of those findings.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Yes, I think the thing I would add is that as we reflect on these challenges from evolving skills needs and to all the way to AI-driven recruitment and shifting performance matrix, it's clear that CHROs are navigating unprecedented complexity. That's perhaps not a surprise. I think what's also clear to us at Winmark, and that's the other big arm of what we do and what we can help the C-suite leaders with, is that there is value in discussing these issues with peers who truly understand the stakes, and doing this in high trust environments where HR leaders can explore these challenges together, sharing insights such as the ones that Catherine's just shared, testing ideas and learning from each other's experiences. And at Winmark, that's exactly what we do. So just putting it in a broader context, perhaps.
Great, thank you. And I'll just move on, just a very short presentation where we'll look at some of the development of some of those skills, how the landscape is changing, and I'll provide some of our latest research on lifelong learning and some other resources for you as well. We'll then go into Q&A. So if you do have any questions, do put them in the chat, and then we'll go through those at the end as a sort of mini panel session. Okay, so in terms of the business landscape at the moment, I think it's fair to say that there's so much change and transformation going on. It's quite difficult to navigate on all of these change programs at the moment. So changes to operating models, HRIS systems, evolution of platforms for reward and benefits. The list is quite endless, and that's on a national or a global scale in some organizations as well. At a recent culture workshop, we actually discussed, is change now a business value? Should that be something that you align to in terms of your operating model, and particularly around the future of work? CIPD, by the way, is going to start a large program of work looking at future of work and some of those future skills pieces. So I'm delighted that we'll start that in the next few months. But in terms of L&D, I think it's continually evolving, and it's evolving at pace at the moment. So this concept around lifelong learning, learning in the flow, etc., particularly around academies in terms of tech usage and upskilling employees, become really, really important at the moment. I'll go into a bit more detail on some of those points at the moment. But I think this sort of going for growth strategy with defining talent, but which methods are required to enable business value is really important at the moment. And just some statistics for you: less than 40% of employees providing structured AI training. So that upskilling piece is coming through quite slowly at the moment. And as Catherine mentioned, which skills do we need to prioritise? Creative thinking and that critical thinking is coming through very, very strongly at the moment. If we go on to the next slide. So I've put all change, please, all change, because it seems to be constant at the moment. I think 2026 is going to be very similar as well, as these transformation and change projects continue. But much has been written about the new skills required when we add humans and technology together, so that augmentation. We're starting to see the mass usage of agents and the rise of sort of project work, agile teams, etc., which of course has a big effect on operating models, and some different types of job functions starting to appear. I think the biggest one is around learning as you go, or learning in the flow of work, where you may work on a project, but you're picking up skills and experiences as you go. So less formal learning, but much more on that sort of skills and experience in the moment. And skills adjacency is coming up time and time again. So which relevant skills can we, that to people already have, which can be reformed or upskilled and shifted across into different parts of the organisation to provide different experiences for employees. So almost like a passport as you go through your career, and very much aligned to that squiggly career idea, where you're picking up different experiences, may come back to a company, may move on, etc., etc. Next slide, please, Catherine. So just wanted to highlight some of the research that we've got. And I suppose the main one is that lifelong learning in the reskilling era. It's got lots of examples here. I think it maps to where we are in terms of education as well, in terms of the changing landscape and skills availability. I think we're starting to see almost an overskilled generation coming out of universities. The report picks up on some of this work, and also in that skills development in the UK workforce. It's very transferable into other parts of the world as well. This really assesses where some of the skills are, and there's another report on the CIPD website called Mind the Skills Gap. So there's quite a lot of reading in this area and lots of stats, and also some benchmarking on our labour market outlook figures as well, which actually launched today, sorry, on the 29th of September, so a couple of days ago. So do take a look at some of those tools and benchmarking things. Specifically around L&D, we've got the how to develop and deliver effective learning, and that looks at some of the changing practices that we're starting to see emerge. So again, resources available there. So how do we future-proof some of our talent? And Winmark and CIPD ran a recent session on this. I've crossed out the word develop here because I think we are moving into that future-proofing piece now. I mentioned the rise of the academy, and I can only see that growing, where we've got very specific learning and learning outcomes required on specific things, such as AI and tech tools. That continual evolution of L&D function, I think there's a bit of delayering going on in some large organisations at the moment, and that role of learning, how that changes over time, we are closely following. But definitely around talent mapping, talent fluidity, talent mobility programs when you're in an international business. But keeping that social mobility at the heart. So EDI remains really important in all of this work. When we look at the upskilling requirement of tech-enabled teams, and that's humans working with different tools, the development requirement is absolutely huge. These figures may be slightly out of date because I think it's a growing need to upskill managers and teams and employees on how to use Copilot and other tools to gain some of those productivity and efficiency gains. What I would say in terms of FTSE at the moment, we know that's about 17% of companies that are upskilling employees, but that number is rising massively and very, very quickly. So again, the next 12 months could just be about development of skills regarding tech. If you can just click on the builds. So we want a happy performing team, and I think, you know, it even rhymes. I've put here, development is key in your EVP. It is a differentiator. We know that capability and skills building within the org leads to greater performance. And I think as we get more into the tech world and humans and tech working together, some of the training and capability uplifts required are going to make massive differences to performance. Finally, if I go to just my last slide, I just wanted to cite some of the other work that we're doing around skills frameworks and specifically AI tools. So we've been working on a project with Innovate UK, where we've got some funding from government and Institute of Future of Work, where we're looking at 3 areas in terms of organisational usage of tech and some of the skills requirements. So do go on and have a look at some of this work. There is a resource hub specifically around this area as well, and it's refreshed it's kept up to date all the time. As we know, all of this stuff is changing very quickly. So that's the AI in the workplace part from us. There are frameworks. We have aligned to the Alan Turing Institute framework for skills development. And so if you are getting stuck with some of these skills rollouts and frameworks, there are some really good resources available in that area. I didn't want AI to take over this conversation, but I think we're all in that space at the moment where we are creating those tech-enabled teams. And I think some of those mindset shifts and that adding flexibility and the propensity to change is probably one of the most important skills to have at the moment. So that's the end of my presentation. I haven't been keeping an eye on the chat, but Doris, have you got any questions that you want to pose to Catherine and I? If we can't answer some of these, or if we need extra stats, we can always go away and find some of the answers for this. Oh, Doris, you're on mute.
Classics. Still years on, and still very easily done. What I thought we could start with is perhaps some case studies. You sort of mentioned the future-proofing of the workforce. So how do organizations do this? Are there any examples of good practice you could share with us, or any case studies with interesting findings that you could give examples of?
I think there's definitely been a rise in apprenticeships, and I think that is certainly one area of development which is growing. So very much on the internal development of skills. So some manufacturing and technology companies are really looking for that growth mindset where they can really provide deep learning to apprenticeships now, to apprentices, sorry, now, give them that 1 or 2 year apprenticeship piece to develop those skills, and hopefully that remains with them within the career. They stay and they develop into, you know, through their career into that sort of senior manager piece.
Yeah, and to just follow off from that as well, I think, you know, very interesting how we see organizations structure their apprenticeships differently, in terms of mirroring the work life too, especially when they take apprenticeships straight out of school. They want to get them into the workforce in the way that their teams currently work. So normally you find, you know, that they mirror the working day, they have set hours. There's a lot of structure behind that, because it's a way of education too. And it's a way of developing employees in that subject matter area, in that field, whether that's, you know, a new field, a new technology that's coming into play, whether that's, you know, a current skills capabilities gap that they're trying to fill. I think it's really inspiring to see a lot of organizations put so much into their apprenticeships, and put so much into, you know, wanting to develop their employees so that, you know, they're with them in the long term too.
I would say also, Doris, in terms of technical skills, we've seen a lot of reverse mentoring. So different generations in the workforce mentoring each other. So we can get some of those skills transferred and experiences. So whether it's on tech or if it's on operational things, that swapping of skills in some organizations is becoming quite important.
And perhaps on that, exploring this a bit further, we have a question on the concept of lifelong learning. You called it learning in the flow as well. Where is the ownership these days? Is the ownership of the responsibility for providing learning experiences shifting from the organization to the employee? What would you say?
Good question. And I think a lot of it sits with the manager, and we're seeing a lot now sitting in that role of the manager to provide or signpost learning or specific actions for employees to enable that learning in the flow. Or we've been talking about CPD as well. How do you record, you know, your learning experiences when we're working at pace in different project teams, etc. So it's quite an interesting area to say, you know, do we have a session for reflective practice at the end of a project? How do we start to embed some of those practices? Is it on the employee to manage that process, or is it more on the manager?
Yeah, and I really liked a comment that someone posted in the previous session. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, but systems eat culture for lunch. So I think in terms of what you mentioned around, you know, having those processes in place for reflection, for continuous learning, what can we do better, improving as you go along, is a very important concept in organizations today, especially amidst all this change and the unknown. But I also think with a lot of what HR leaders are trying to find during the recruitment process is that mindset from the beginning. So being curious, finding the right cultural fit, finding a person that asks the right questions and is really interested in the topic matter.
Yeah, and I think it's providing those opportunities as well. So when we talk about skills development, you have to provide people with opportunities to grow and to try different things. And I think when we get into more of the AI and tech in teams, this is going to be really important, as AI can very much filter and guide us sometimes to a median point or an average. We need to continue to look at some of those outlying things, and it comes into recruitment as well, in terms of bias and all of those things. Do we take those opportunities still and spot some of those outlying pieces?
Stephen, maybe use this time to give a bit more context in terms of the change from moving from hard skills, technical skills, and because that was a big focus area, a few years ago, but all of a sudden it seems like a 180 to the soft skills, critical thinking element. A lot of that, from what we've been speaking in our closed door sessions too, is because of, the widespread use of ChatGPT. When it was first kind of adopted, there were a lot of gaps and mistakes, so to speak. And now I think critical thinking becoming such a focus, and what managers are really wanting to see as well, how that really came about and what that really means for the future. Is it here to stay?
Yeah, and I think it's critical thinking and creativity. So as I just mentioned, in terms of some of those outlying points, we need to pick up on some of those, and that's actually where some of the innovation will probably come, which in turn will come through as business growth. So I think, how do we provide some learning for early careerists, say, to work on critical thinking? How do we provide space to learn and to to be creative in different ways, or think around problems? And those, of course, are the human skills that we're trying to look for.
I think it's also part of our CIPD findings. I can't remember which research it was, but actually AI sort of actually making us use our critical skills more, because we have to be creative in how we use it in order to get the right, correct outcome out of it. So yes, I think there is it's not all AI driven and we're not involved in it. I think that this isn't a death of critical thinking. In fact, it's just a new era, I think, for it. We also talked about skills, but also mindset and lifelong learning, but also roles. What roles future HR leaders need to adopt? And at a recent meeting, and it stuck with me, there was a conversation around HR leaders needing to be and become chief storytellers, to create that cultural organizational buy-in. What would you both say to that?
I'm happy to pick that up. I think it's a real skill for HR leaders to be able to, it comes through on that cultural piece. So how can we align people specifically around whether it's a project or a transformational change, etc. And it starts with that storytelling. It starts with the message and that clarity of communication. So when we know that there's multiple change programs going on all of the time, so how do we cut through some of that stuff and create some of that mindset change? I think, sorry, yeah. Catherine.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Stephen. I think we only have, a few minutes left and a few more questions to go through from the Q&A from the audience. Doris, Stephen, myself, Chris is asking, with a changing landscape and things moving fast, such as what you learned yesterday is no more valid today, how do you invest in training and how do you motivate people to learn?
I think it comes into that performance piece. So bring your experiences with you And I don't know whether it's a skills passport, or there's another question about skills-based organisations. We've heard a lot of companies that are doing skills audits and then job families leading on to specific career pathways through organisations. That may be really relevant for some organisations and not for others. So I think there's some different operating models starting to come through, and that will in turn lead to different skills and learning styles and applications.
You know what I found fascinating from one of our closed door sessions was a case study around AI adoption. And so, you know, that's in the context of that question, how do you motivate people to learn rather than the AI tool itself? And this organization actually, you know, had informal groups. So they didn't tell, you know, tell their employees and their organization to form informal groups, but they said, you know, they encouraged them to get together, to meet for coffees, and to set up kind of social settings where it's a bit more relaxed, to talk about the challenges, and to kind of give a light agenda or a light structure to how they can utilize these social groups to overcome some of the change and motivate each other to learn. So what they found was, you know, parents getting together to talk about how they use ChatGPT and how that change amongst organization has either saved time or caused, you know, certain headaches within their teams and use. But because they had the same context of, you know, being parents, having particular day schedules, they faced the same context when it came to the challenges. Similar with, you know, younger generations, younger workforce, they banded together. So I found that really fascinating and a great case study.
Yeah, and I'd say also things like shadow boards or some of those early careerists. We've heard some companies putting in, you know, an entry level sort of mini board where for development purposes. So handing them the board papers or some problems and saying, how can you innovate on this subject? So I think there's that level of creativity is coming through in different organisations as well.
And then Stephen, Abdallah is asking, particularly, are the CIPD doing any work on the change thinking and practices that will be required to encourage employees to come along the technology and AI journey?
Absolutely. So there's that AI hub, which I referenced, and we'll make the slides available. So do click through onto that. There's lots of resources about what it means for you as a HR professional or a people professional. There's also some of our learning materials which we're designing at the moment. We can't design them quickly enough about sort of performance through people, but also tech-enabled teams that we're just launching at the moment as well.
Great. And Doris, Stephen, Joanna's asking, I'd be interested in any examples where organizations have successfully become skills-based organizations, moving away from tenure hierarchical ways of thinking.
Doris, any ideas?
Nothing that comes to mind. I think it's just a shift. I think we're at the stage of desire still. We're talking about this, but nothing that comes to mind. I don't know if you've had any in your research, Catherine, that has come.
I've heard in financial services in particular, okay, there is a move to it, but it takes a lot of board level engagement to flip to that strategy, and it's not a short process. I think but the results can be huge because you can start to recruit and upskill according to job families, career pathways, etc., and really put that development in place. We've even seen companies moving to reward-based pay based on some of those skills that are being developed throughout that career.
We're also seeing more embedding, right? Rather than kind of moving away from hierarchical ways of thinking, more embedding these moments or areas of flexibility, especially for kind of early career starters, graduates, middle managers, having a bit more autonomy over certain parts of the workflow or certain parts of the project. as opposed to the whole project itself, given that a lot of sectors require a lot of experience, historical experience, as well as kind of that level of understanding risk through a wider landscape, a different level of critical thinking, a different level of foresight, that not necessarily middle managers and graduates would have that visibility. So I think it's more around embedding those skills of critical thinking and using your judgment in an appropriate way within your remit, rather than fully moving away from, the hierarchy, which is necessary in some cases.
Yeah, and I would say I think we did some work with Microsoft last year, and the main focus was not about using Microsoft per se. It was about getting curious with tech. And I can see there's quite a lot of questions about senior leaders. It's as much about understanding the possible usage of some tools at the moment, thinking about how you can change some of those software and modules that you have available to you, and of course the data issue. So I do wonder if some of the data and quality issues will start to come to the fore in the next few months. I was just picking up on Tina's question about how much do you think the education system also needs to adjust. I think it needs to adjust massively here, because there's a lot of free learning that's available now. Some of the curriculum pieces need to adapt to technology, critical thinking, all of these things. I'd love to see that coming through in sort of GCSEs and A levels and through apprenticeships, and that being really called out now. I just don't think we can move quickly enough to add those into the curriculum now, because everyone's using these tools already. So it seems strange that it's not in the curriculum, but we know that takes time to come through.
I don't know if we have time for one more question today. I've got a few coming across through the questions and answers channel rather than the chat. What strategies can HR use to foster inclusion across multi-generational, multicultural and neurodiverse teams? And also, how can we equip managers to lead with empathy, clarity and adaptability in times of rapid change?
I'm happy to answer that. I think it's the role of the manager is probably key here, and that starts from the leadership team. So we talk about culture, we talk about values. How can all of these things be embedded and be really clear right from the start and right from the board level, and really calling it out as a value of the organisation? And when we look at purpose, values, and having that feed all through the organisation, I think is key. And of course, development is one part of that EVP, as we mentioned. I think it's just critical at the moment.
I think we've had our 2-minute warning. I don't know if
but happy to catch up with everyone offline if people do want to get in contact and have any further questions.
Yes, and we'll capture the questions and we're happy to follow up. I think there's a question for you, Catherine, as well, but we can perhaps take it offline.
That's great.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you to Green Park for the invitation again. It's very lovely and great to be here for a second time round.
And to share our insights. Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Doris. Thank you, Stephen. Really appreciate your time and insights on that one. And thank you to the audience also for questions. Sounds like a really great session. Lots of food for thought that hopefully will provoke conversations in your own organisations. We're now going to take a 5-minute break before we come back for the next session. And we'll be talking to a fantastic panel, so I hope you'll stick around. We're talking about the evolving role of the Chief People Officer and the Chief Executive and their relationship. So we'll be back at 11:05. Please keep this, keep your questions coming, keep your insights coming. Looking forward to a really, really interesting conversation.